Jimmy Jamison. The time has come. I'm so excited that this episode is here and that you're here in the studio.
I appreciate it.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's glad to be here.
So what do you do for Cumberland Heights?
So I am over the IT department here at Cumberland Heights. Just day-to-day operations from a software perspective, from network perspective, infrastructure, kind of over that side of the business here. Been doing it for
a while.
Since 17 years. It'll be 18 in August.
All here at Cumberland, yeah.
Yeah, all here at Cumberland.
It's a stretch.
It's a long time.
How have you seen the team? Well, give people some examples of things that maybe you or the team are doing on a day-to-day. Because I think when we hear IT, we're thinking changing passwords or...
Way more than that. So I think what people just don't really see from day to day is just the thought that goes behind making sure that everyone here has everything that they need, from a day-to-day perspective, whether it is password resets or if their monitor's broken or PC's working. But along that too is just the growth that we envision in the future. So being able to establish, like, from a standpoint of connectivity between buildings, for instance, making sure that we're up to speed with changes in technology when it comes to, say, wiring or just things that we don't even see as a regular staff member here, that goes a long way from us to be able to say, all right, we want to put TVs now in every location. So what does that mean? Do we plan properly for infrastructure? And
you can't just put them up on the wall?
You can't just put them up on the wall. Need more than power, So a lot of that goes into that perspective, and that's kind of half of the team. And then from my perspective, it's a lot of software development to make, people's jobs easier. So software that I developed, for trouble tickets. That's one of the first ones that I developed when I first got hired on, to be honest.
Shout out to Pinpoint.
Shout out to Pinpoint. It's been living since 2006, and it's still kind of pressing on. So,
yeah.
That's a culmination of just everything that we do. We have a small team too, so my guys are always, on task. Doing whatever's needed from this campus as well as our Arch campus, our next Arch campus, as well as all of our outpatient facilities and Stillwater's combined.
Both Stillwater's now.
That's right.
Yep. So, and every IOP location,
right.
Everything in between.
That's right.
Yeah. That's interesting. How has that changed? How has the team changed? Like when you started, it was you and Jermaine?
Mm-hmm.
Was it just y'all two?
Just us two. I actually started off with him, and he was a really good friend of mine. And just a background for me, I was kind of doing freelance development work for several different companies. And then kind of got to the point where I needed to have some stability from an insurance perspective with family and children.
No doubt.
So Cumberland kind of needed, sorry about that, oh my God. Cumberland needed, I could have sworn it's John calling this actually. So Cumberland was like really, really young as far as tech, in which every place was really young in tech. This was a long time ago. So
early 2000s.
Yeah, I came on board officially in 2006, but I think I might have done some contract work a little bit before that. But we were very, very young, and so Jermaine was running everything IT. Johnny Rosen was here at the time too, so he was kind of a little bit helpful with that respect. So when they brought me on board, it kind of gave us the ability to kind of have a dichotomy, where we were able to do just PC support, network support, as well as software development. And that's when TIER, our second EHR, came online in 2006. So I was able to kind of take that over as well to manage that with reporting, et cetera. So it kind of gave us the foundation for a cohesive kind of baseline IT department. Yeah. Really exciting.
Very, very exciting. Yeah. Well, because this is kind of a cheat interview for me.
Yeah, somewhat.
Because we've worked so closely together for 6 years.
6 years.
So, I'm an honorary member of the IT team,
right.
if you will.
Yeah.
And why don't you tell that story of how, like, from 2007 to, I guess it would have been 2018, right before we started working together, what you saw change the company? Because I'm thinking about AS400, I'm thinking about TIER, I'm thinking about, there were some people that were working here at the time, Josh Kozar, and reporting and how that matured.
Yeah.
Network and cybersecurity. Is there anything else you want to color in between those lines?
Well, I'll say this.
So there's a period of growth.
I think fast forward to now, and then I'll go back in the past.
All right.
So how things are now, we are so internet based, just technology based as a world, not just as a company now.
Yeah.
So if we go back in time, like you mentioned, IT was kind of looked at as a cost center.
Right.
So we weren't making money for the company, we were spending money.
Right.
So in those times, it was very difficult for us to we had to pretty much operate on a shoestring budget.
Right.
Kind of make things kind of happen and make things work. So as time progressed, and I'll have to give you a shout out, that when you came on board, things started changing. We started seeing things from the standpoint of, we need to go to level 5 and we're on level 2. How do we get there? We have to spend money.
Right.
We have to invest in infrastructure. So
Right.
I think we've really, really, really sped up. And since you've been here the past 5 years, we've gone from, struggling from an IT department to flourishing, and it gives me the ability to kind of, alongside with you and alongside with Matt, to kind of start projecting out, like, where do we want to go?
Right.
I have that freedom to kind of start thinking about things outside of what's in front of us, but actually what's going to be in the next 5 years or the next 10 years.
Right. Yeah, well, our first project that we worked on together, big unexpected, was the implementation and launch of Sunwave. Who's our current EHR, EMR. So
deal.
for those that are kind of like, where's this going? Am I going to follow along with this? Right, Tier was a on-prem, lived on a server here at our primary site, piece of software. Think of it as like back in the day when you'd get a CD-ROM
exactly.
of software that
Microsoft
you would
Office.
install Microsoft Office on your local machine.
Correct.
Tier, from a big perspective, was that on our network. And we, made a DNA shift away from that type of service to what is known as a web-based application.
Correct.
So all that information is hosted somewhere else. It's not up to us, and we log in using this thing called the internet. So that was a big deal.
Huge.
All the work that went into that.
Huge.
As well as like when people log on to the intranet and they're consuming BI reports, about our patients, or reports being sent to finance about activity of the day, or a bed report is all that's being pulled in real time via API that you had to build.
Correct.
So that's really been what I've seen is, our transition away from on-premise localized for the things that we don't need to have localized to a cloud-based environment, which, not to mention, like, the camera infrastructure was replaced, Wi-Fi, full cabling rebuild, medical record, finance system, payroll system. What else have we done? Measurement-based care, and pretty much every technology system that we use to do business has been replaced. So I don't know if it's about me. I think that I think the organization was ready. I want to give a shout out to the whole leadership team.
Of course.
Jay in particular, I think they were kind of ready to just really put the organization in position to not have us working for technology.
Right.
To have whatever systems we're going to use working for us.
Agreed.
And then there was some really, maybe some God-centered hires like Jen Sudak. And shout out to Antoinette, even though she's going on for another opportunity. There have been plenty of people who have made contributions to making sure that, because it's hard to sometimes spend the time that's needed with staff to make sure they understand why a change is happening.
Sure.
In fact, that might have been my greatest lesson so far, is how important it is to take your time with the stakeholders, the customers, really.
Yeah.
Our customers are the staff, if you kind of think about it that way, to make sure that they know what's going on.
Yeah, sometimes you got to handhold them, and I think that's sometimes the better approach. To make sure that they fully understand it. Because what I've tried to do over time is like, even though I know what's going on up here in my head, sometimes it's hard to kind of get that out in a communicative way for someone else to understand it. So what I've tried to teach my team and guide them is to say, let's get some analogies, that we can kind of explain it to them in a certain way so that it doesn't just go over their head, or we don't want to feel like we're talking down to someone. And I think that's kind of a lesson that we all had to go through. And I think it's a continual learning progression. And I agree with you 100%. Sometimes we have to take that time to slow it down. Even though we want to go 150 miles an hour, we have to take it back to 15, school zone level.
So would you explain to people how our system works in terms of, our development environment, not for, Pinpoint or Chimp or any of those, but how we're consuming data through the use of API. Okay. And maybe explain what an API is.
Yeah, so I guess kind of how I think about API. I'm going to just briefly talk about the movement from on-prem to cloud. So Nick made a good point to say that on-prem would be like you installing a piece of software on your physical device. And so we have 300 plus devices. We don't want to have to install the same piece of software 300 times. So moving to the cloud, gives us the ability to say we can point everyone to one location that's housed at, a serving platform somewhere at Amazon or Microsoft or whatever.
An API is a digital doorway.
Yeah. So
and you have your key.
Correct. So just in a nutshell, new ways of getting information. So from a security perspective, so most companies now don't allow you to have keys to the kingdom, meaning that you have full unfettered access to, say, a database with thousands of records or millions of records or whatever. So what they do is they give you, like Nick said, like a key to be able to say, okay, here's the door. We'll allow you to come through that door, and here's the limited amount of information that you can actually pull back from that door to process. What that does is kind of it was a barrier for me in my development initially, because it forced me to restructure how I consume information. So before in our previous EMR, for example, tier, I was able to go and grab, a million records at a time in one fell swoop and then manipulate it, no problem, right? But from an API perspective, you have to kind of have more of a controlled approach. So I have to really know exactly what I'm looking for. I have to pretty much ask that server, hey, I want to know what the census is for this particular day. How many patients do we have? I go to the door, put the key in, open the door, they give me that back, they lock the door. So I have to continuously do that time and time and time again. And so then from a development perspective, you have to start designing applications to kind of replicate that over and over and over again. And that's kind of what we've had to do for all of our data consumption as far as Sunway's perspective, which drives a vast amount of reports and dashboard structures that we use here at Cumberland. So,
and where's our database hosted?
So our database is actually hosted here on-prem, right? But it's a virtual server. So back in the day, we would have physical machinery, right, stacked on top of each other, and each one had its own particular purpose. Well, several years ago, we were able to get what we call a SAN solution, or a virtual space, where it really blows my mind to even think about this.
I know, me too.
Where you have servers that really don't exist from a physical perspective, but from a software perspective, the system sees it as a physical device, right? It has memory, it has hard drive space, etc. But it's just a file, which is really, really mind-blowing. So we have several of those that Matt Stonerock actually is in charge of that particular piece on our IT team, and managing, countless servers. I can't even tell you how many we have now, you know? And so it's just scalable too. Yeah, so we can have, say if we need to turn up a server and add additional resources to it. Historically, you'd have to order parts. One, you got to make sure that the server itself could actually retain the parts. Now it's just a matter of logging in, telling it you want to increase it by double, and you push a button, and boom, it's done.
You got it ready to go. You can start dumping data in. Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, and we're a SQL shop.
SQL Server. Yep. So our database infrastructure, SQL Server. I'm not sure how to really explain that to people, but it's like a Excel on steroids.
That's right.
I guess we can look at it from that perspective.
I mean, it's kind of funny. Like, so here's what I've appreciated about being a part of your team and us working together. Because when I started, I think I took the approach in terms of when I started, managing technology, and we were just trying to make sure we were executing goals that we were given.
Right.
If you remember what was going on at that time, there was some things that were unexpected, and so, I'm a therapist by training, and a researcher and a scientist, but from a traditional psychology sense. So like what I mean is like very familiar with tools like Excel and how to wrangle and clean data manually in Excel. And then I was using at the time tools like SPSS and M+. I've graduated now to R, shout out to R, or I guess POSIT, whatever they call it now, POSIT. But all that to say, these are really off-the-shelf products, and you have to learn that language, and then you can light code in that language to execute some analysis.
Right.
But it's very cross-sectional, right?
Yep.
So I didn't really have a lot of experience in true data science as of yet, or big database management from a healthcare organization perspective. So us being able to collaborate together and really, I think I tackled everything. So what I did is, because you guys knew I didn't know anything and I just simply didn't know anything, I had to kind of act like, I had to have like a child's mind. So I remember having so many conversations with Matt in particular during that season, where he was telling me we needed something like a firewall or this, that, or the other, or to expand our SAN solution, or maybe to get whatever it was. And I would have to be like, okay, I want to help. It's my job to get you resources. You need to explain this to me like I'm, an elementary school, kid, and it was really helpful for me to understand kind of what the building blocks are.
And I'll say kudos to you, not to interrupt you, but kudos to you for taking that approach, because some people would come in and just be overwhelmed with it and just say, well, just give me the numbers, give me what you think we need, and you can regurgitate that. But I think that when you came in and took the time to learn it, I remember when first off you would come back and say, well, you would spew off terms and you'd be pretty close, But then over time though, you started grasping it, and I think that's been really helpful too.
Well, thanks to you guys, and now we're, in a minute I'm going to transition to what we were just talking about before this, because I think that's where we're going. It'll be interesting. One of the things, but like when I think about my knowledge of SQL and what was so interesting is because we started first collaborating on those projects and also research, where I was like, hey, I need the data in this format, long or wide.
Long, wide,
SQL essentially in a lot of ways can be considered similar to Excel in terms of their rows and their columns.
For the lowest level,
for the lowest level. And so how can you grab those objects and manipulate them to an array or a vector of choice to execute something would be sort of, do you remember how we built the BI platform? I mean, do you remember those early days?
I do.
What do you think the organization learned from that? And talk about maybe how things were and what we were trying to do.
Yeah, so we're still in the same boat. We've come a long way, but historically, people don't like change, and that's just a big part of just a psyche. So a lot of things that we were communicating were all through email, mundane email with the Excel spreadsheets. And, so you'd have information that I would send to you. You might manipulate it within your department to send to your people. And then I might manipulate it on my side for my people. But there's no cohesive, generic truth of what that data represents. So from the Power BI perspective, that's just the platform from Microsoft for reporting to kind of it just works well with the Microsoft products. We decided to use that in our environment and started with like a basic census report. We would send that out daily, every morning and then every evening. So we had a centralized place. We started there and tried to get people to actually go to our staff portal, which we revamped a couple of years ago, to be able to view that in one location and not have to rely upon emails and spreadsheets, right? That's really evolved with, like I said, Jen has done a great job with that for lots of different endeavors. And so I think it's just taking the time to kind of go department to department to figure out what people are doing, because without doing that,
we would have been
lost. We
made a lot of assumptions
correct
on the beginning of what people really needed, and it was so valuable. We learned a lot of, there was opportunities to create efficiencies because we were starting to have conversations with departments that maybe weren't talking.
Correct.
And eliminate redundancy.
Yep.
And then I think we learned, there's a reason why 9 times or 8 times out of 10 that somebody's requesting these things because they're trying to be able to use it to execute Z.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So I think understanding that has been phenomenal. I think that's, if you're looking at it from a curve perspective, we started off kind of slow. And then, as we started kind of getting a grasp of, well, I wonder how much more out there exists in this format. And then with Jennifer kind of, increasing her skill set from Power BI, and then from a tech perspective for how we kind of control it from an IT perspective, from security to database, and meshing that together, has really skyrocketed the ability for us to convert manual processes into more streamlined, efficient processes, which then returns time back to the user. Less frustration, which saves the company money if you look at it from a soft cost perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's been widely accepted. I think we still have our barriers. We still have people that still don't want to have change. Case in point, we had a couple meetings a couple days ago, with different departments that, I took the ownership of it being my fault for not really reaching out. And that's a learning thing for me. I think I'm constantly learning, even though I've been here 17 years and kind of know Cumberland Heights as a system, taking that, learning from not touching every department to find out, one, are you even using it, And so learning from that will help us kind of grow as well, cohesively.
When you're working with multiple teams of people, like that's one of the things I love about this place is, everybody wants to help. Mm-hmm. Everybody's here to help.
Yeah.
And it's not just here at a certain location, it's across the organization. And we I think it always pays to take the time mm-hmm. to make sure, and we exchange that with our time, mm-hmm. right? Pace.
Right.
But gosh, walking over to the specific stakeholders, yep. I just say with nursing, with Tammy, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like spending the time we needed to understand what they were trying to accomplish
right.
made sense.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And then once we established that, instead of them, everybody being frustrated all the way around, it was like, well, we can just deliver that.
That's right.
And I think like that afternoon, Jennifer
exactly.
delivered the
That's
solution
right.
that they were looking for,
sure did.
And it's done. So it's a valuable lesson from like a customer service perspective, mm-hmm. and kudos to you really, and Jennifer. Like I couldn't have ever imagined kind of that trajectory of collaboration because we first started all that with a consultant.
That's right, we sure did.
And he did a good job, but
mm-hmm.
like it's really hard to. I say this: if you're considering trying to build that type of environment, it's hard for somebody on the outside who doesn't understand maybe behavioral health in terms of a space and
right.
also doesn't understand the different players, the different consumers very well.
Right.
It's hard to create a solution for process and people you don't know.
However, my takeaway from this, that whole deal was none of us knew the space. None of us knew Power BI.
True.
And so I think that having someone that actually knows the software, whether they know our business model or not, they were able to deliver something for us. Right?
Very true.
And I think when you have that, then you can start looking under the hood and figure out like, okay, this is how he did this. So now I can kind of apply this or adapt it or expand it. And I think that the speed of getting that product in hand, I think it was very beneficial.
Yeah.
And I'll take that back to like just how I even learned software. I didn't learn it from school. I was kind of self-taught. And so how I learned it was getting a finished product and then reverse engineering that product.
Right.
And then learning, those steps. And I think if I didn't have that mentality, I try to take that same mentality to everything that we're doing now, which is why I brought up that point about reverse engineering that particular Power BI mm-hmm. report to give us that growth. So I think it was a good exercise.
So listen, like we know each other pretty well.
Yeah, I think so.
Why have you been here for 17 years?
So it's funny you asked that. It's like I've always been like a creature of habit for one, but then for me it's having that investment in a place that invests in you, you mm-hmm. know. And I've always, I guess, from my parents, my dad, he taught algebra and geometry in high school for Hillwood High School, a local school here. My mom, she worked for the state, and they both retired from their respective professions. So I think, that's like kind of a learned thing. And then with my age, that's kind of one of those things that you just did when you were coming up. It's like you pick a company and you stick with it, I'm not really interested in hopping around. I just never really had that mentality for that.
Yeah.
Now, if I wasn't being treated appropriately, then that would be a different story. But
Sure.
I mean, I've loved it here. I mean, I've had a lot of freedoms to be creative, which is invaluable. You know, a lot of people don't have that ability or have the leeway to do it. So kudos to you and leadership as well over time to be able to allow that for me. So
Well,
nice.
it's our privilege, man. Cumberland Heights would not be, I can honestly say this, you know, this place would not be what it is today. You know, you mentioned the infrastructure, you know, I mean, it's moving the campus from 5A to 6.
Yeah.
Which people don't, Cat 5A to Cat 6, like, so that we could have the bandwidth across our different platforms that we knew we were going to be investing in, like a commercial Wi-Fi system, cameras, new computers that were requiring more data, all the different web-based applications that people use now, inclusive of Zoom, which we didn't know about at the time.
Correct.
Setting all that aside for the nerds.
Correct.
I'll just say, like, without you, Jimmy, Cumberland Heights wouldn't have been nearly as successful as it has been over the last 17 years,
Well, I
brother.
appreciate
So
that.
it is our
I appreciate
pleasure.
that. Thank you.
Would you one of the things I think about in our time was 2020. And I think about
Rough year.
yeah, I think about telehealth and the tablet program.
Yep.
And delivering service that way, in particular at this residential site. What comes to mind when besides, you know, you wanting to just walk out?
I think it was one of those moments, you know, and I have to give kudos to my team as well for being able to like pivot, you know, on a dime, literally. You know, we're looking at, was it April 2020? April of 2020?
Yeah.
You know, and having to figure out like, how can we deliver services, you know, in this COVID environment that was brand new to everyone in the world, you know, and been able to spin up Zoom and utilize Teams internally within Zoom, and then affixing that to the tablet program, you know, to make it available for patients that are in quarantine to be able to join groups. I mean, it was a phenomenal feat that I'm proud to say that I was a part of with Cumberland Heights as a whole, but especially my team, to be able to pull that off successfully. You know, for staff as well as patients. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think it was a week, and Randall was a part of that too, and Chad, Sydney, and Amanda, the IOP staff in particular, when we had to. I kind of laugh at it now because I remember the year before, you know, Jay had kind of challenged a few of the teams to try for us to begin to think about and consider, you know, how we might leverage telehealth in general.
Yeah.
You know, some foreshadowing there that we all were unaware of. And,
Sure.
you know, we had me and you and Randall, and we were using a different product back then, if you remember that one. And kind of like a sandbox, just seeing how it, and we were very slow paced.
Yeah.
And then whenever that happened in March, when it was like an official, you know, everybody kind of remembers where they were. I don't know exactly where I was, except I knew that 7 days later, the entirety of our outpatient services was being delivered via Zoom. You know, and then what we had to do with detox and testing, and how quickly the medical staff had to pivot to, anyways, not to bring up anything that everybody did, but you know, that was a
huge deal.
Remember what happened in the middle of that too was April 1st. Do you remember what happened April 1st, 2020?
I do not. What happened April 1st?
You and me and the rest of the team were out at Arch Academy
doing our
at like 10 p.m. Overnight.
Oh yeah, that's right. Now you're bringing up painful moments.
Setting up computers and
that's right. Arch opened up. Arch opened up. On April
we've
1st.
had a couple of those. Like, so for those that don't, there's times that we've had to have a couple overnights when we're, you know,
flashing.
phone system or whatever else. Yeah. So what are you working on today?
So I have several, like, just coding endeavors. Close chart audit is one of the deals that I'm working on now to kind of give more insight for staff and the managers to be able to see, like, what items are outstanding from our EHR perspective. Several little smaller projects with Paylocity. What else am I working on just a myriad of things. You know, I don't have a huge major project at the moment. We just finished up the measurement-based care report cards or progress monitoring. It's going to go live, I think,
which are really
maybe next
cool.
week.
Like just for that's kind of it's really monumental project that y'all worked on. You and Mike Barklage, our other developer, and Antoinette, led by Antoinette.
Mm-hmm.
You know, basically what this is a dynamic automated report that is generated based on the user. Well, sorry, technology terms, based on the patient's data obtained from the measurement-based care system and some other information obtained from the medical record that composites into a PDF automatically.
Yeah, and
it's a tremendous product.
It's really impressive. I mean, it takes the details from that patient's experience with respect to measurement-based care and kind of, you know, writes out a narrative, you know, for each of the respective screeners, you know, and it reads just so fluently, you know, even though it's a lot of dynamic kind of text and content, but it was the way it was written and how we were able to deliver it, you know, is makes it so much easier for the patient to be able to understand it all, you know, even from how you guys as PhDs, you know, can kind of see it and interpret that information, but from a layperson to be able to see it
That's
and understand
the most important.
exactly what this means, like whether if I'm doing better, if I'm getting worse, if I'm staying the same, you know, what that trajectory means. So it's been great.
Yeah,
I'm proud of that. It's one of the largest projects that I'm the most proud of as far as, you know, output, because of that. The patients are going to benefit from it. You know, a lot of things that we do is great for the infrastructure, it's great for staff, but I think for me, a lot of times just seeing something that myself or my team has worked on that the patients get to actually experience, you know, it means more to me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Can you talk about what we've learned, what you're learning, what Matt's learning about cybersecurity these days, and maybe give some, I don't know, of your opinions about how some of our peers, how we need to be prepared?
Yeah. So cybersecurity is just another one of those booming areas, as well as like AI. So we can maybe talk about that later. But with cybersecurity, it's just the players out there, you know, are just getting better and better and better. You know, even though if we have, you know, hardware, software policies in place, you know, from our infrastructure, you know, it's just that lowest level is the user, you know, and so from our perspective, we're trying our best to help educate the users. So we have a third-party platform called KnowBefore, which is a nationally recognized application that kind of can push out campaigns, like campaign meaning like sample emails that are trying to phish you. And then if someone does acknowledge it or click on that or open up the attachment, then we get notified, and it gives us the ability to say, hey, you know, this is what you need to look out for.
Just to be clear.
Just to be clear.
I just want everybody in here to know that unbeknownst to me, Matt and Josh and Chris have increased the intensity of the phishing samples just for me to try to get me.
They want to get you, Nick.
And I think they got me once. Okay. But yeah, I've been holding strong and challenge accepted. But yeah, they do a good job of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we have lots of tools in place, you know, and I have to give credit to Matt and Josh and Chris, you know, to kind of stay on top of it, because we have things in place. So if Nick receives an email that our systems kind of flag it as particularly dangerous, you know, they can kind of automatically pull that back. Sometimes they do come through, you know, and that's when it comes down to the user being able to look at the message and kind of look for telltale signs, like, you know, who it's coming from, and being able to look at the actual address. And a lot of times it might be misspelled, or just reading the actual text within the email message, if it's there misspellings, or, you know, just there's telltale signs for the most part, or even be able to hover over an image or a link to kind of see what displays. It makes it a little bit harder for phones, but I think for PCs, it's just the lowest level we have to get to is training the staff to be able to, you know, locate those anomalies, you know, before clicking on it. So I think as a company as a whole, I think we're doing pretty well.
So is it just email, or what else? What are the other ways, like classically, that, you know, an organization can experience a cybersecurity breach?
I don't know if I want to talk about it. I'm not on wood. So we've done so well. There's lots of different areas of attack, but the one I want to focus on just for this conversation is, you know, the email, email from the users.
Yeah,
that's the biggest one, because that's the one that we really can't control. I can't control you thinking it was, an actual email from a peer. And you
And the
click
risk,
on that,
right? The risk is not only like a package being,
Deployed,
a piece of code being deployed
Right.
on your local phone,
correct?
or which is then connected to the Wi-Fi, which is on our network, or your computer. But it's also when you accidentally might try to sign into a space,
That's
right? That looks like it's trying to deliver you a package or whatever. And if once you give over those Office 365
That's right.
credentials, so like a third party agent will then use those to gain access to
Correct.
your
Correct.
environment.
And that
thus
goes back to what
ours.
we implemented maybe a year or so ago, was that it's a bane of people's existence. I know this multi-factor authentication. It can be a pain in the neck. However, in those events that Nick just mentioned, it's the final barrier for an outside party to try to establish a connection to your
No
system.
doubt.
So
Yeah, no doubt. So, talk about the call we just had before this, if you don't mind, and maybe start with why we're interested in it.
So I was talking to Nick a few days ago, I guess. Started thinking about artificial intelligence. It's everywhere. I'm even not guilty, but I was always nervous about AI. Just from my background and how data is kind of aggregated and used. From say Facebook or anything else we do. But one day I tried it, right? And so I was able to look for some kind of a coding thing I was trying to research. And it was like,
Oh, you one of those generators?
yeah, it instantly kind of gave me a piece of code that, it wasn't exactly what I needed, but it was like 95% what I needed,
Right.
And so before I would usually Google, and it might take me, say, 10, 15 minutes to find it, but it was instantaneous. So it was great. So it kind of sparked my interest to start looking at AI. And then, part of the reason why you were brought to Cumberland, from the Research Institute perspective, to say, like, what are we trying to accomplish here, with the amount of data that we're gathering from patients, as well as the measurement-based care, et cetera. Like, now that we have all this data from all these years, how are we going to compile that into something that's meaningful, something that we can actually look at and say, what questions do we want to answer, right? So I started looking into it, and it's like a massive abyss of information, from what different levels of AI you're trying to do, machine learning and all this other
Neural nets, deep
and stuff
learning,
like that. Yeah. So Nick and I were just talking about it and heading over to lunch, actually. And I think you text
Our
Sunwave,
friend, yeah,
friend
Ellie.
Sunwave, and then Ellie actually sent you a Zoom link, and
We
were
hopped
hopping
on,
on
yeah.
the call in Nick's office, and just the it's unbelievable, like what software can do. I mean, I've written some great applications over the years for other companies that it's been wonderful, but I mean, it's nothing at all compared to what the new horizon is for AI. And it's kind of scary. And I think Ellie was he didn't really say that.
He
It was
said
scary,
some things.
but he said some
I won't
things.
say what he said.
Yeah, but he said some things,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the things that he showed us,
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about it. I mean, we were just kind of geeking out before
Yeah.
we came in here, just the thought of it all.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've kind of been a little bit of a stick in the mud about it at times, just because. So I've said this many times, but you know this. Like, I'm a therapist
Yeah.
by training, and let's take just the Sunwave example is a good one, because Sunwave has a product. It's not a Sunwave commercial, but
Yeah. No, right.
they have a product called Mara, and Mara will summarize clinical notes, among some other things that Ellie showed us, which I'm not sure are public or private, so I won't dive into them.
Sure,
But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
more than that.
Yeah, way more.
And anyways, as a therapist, there is a utility, I suppose, is really where this is going. Of writing notes, of not speeding through the process and having the time. Now, I recognize that, there are therapists that have been doing this longer than I was an active therapist, and I need to consider the experiences of others instead of,
Right.
pretending that my bias rules above all others. Setting that aside, it's so valuable to be able to kind of track. I call it the rudder. We were talking about it, like having your rudder, for, especially for the next session.
Yeah.
Because you go on with your life, you go on with the treatment plan revision, you go on with the meeting that you're in or whatever else. But when I'm going to meet with you the week after, Jimmy, and my patient or client, sometimes it's helpful to be able to pull that back up and say, where were we?
Sure.
So that said, as I've seen in particular, the tool that I've seen the most of in our own ecosystem is this Mara. That will summarize individual and group notes as well as tool assessments like the BPS, the biopsychosocial. And I hadn't seen that BPS piece yet. So like for those that might be listening, basically it was a almost completed BPS. Correct. And the piece at the end, which is where you write your clinical indications and or summary, which is text summary of the assessment itself, probably after the patient has left or the client has left the session.
Yep.
Because the BPS is a form, generally speaking, where you're collecting information that's going to guide treatment plans and treatment interventions for whatever level of care that person's in. So this is like history of treatment, medication use, trauma experiences. I mean, it is a very dense or rich document, very important. What I saw that product do was fascinating, which was essentially, I don't know what your eyes saw, but my eyes saw a well-written summary of not only that form, but in context to the rest of the record.
That is correct. That's exactly what I saw.
Just to be clear.
Very fast.
Very fast. And not saved, giving you the opportunity to edit and review and ultimately save time. So I think that my stick in the mud is moving.
Yeah, and even if you didn't like what it said, you can have it'll rewrite it again.
Right.
Come out totally different.
Right.
Yeah,
but what we're trying to do
yeah.
is a bit different because that, you know, manipulating text like that is very complicated and also doesn't match up the strategic goals that we have because the original goal that we had all those years ago, or the original kind of like dream or whatever that was that we would kind of daydream about as an organization was, you know, prescriptive treatment planning.
Right.
In other words, like, let's say that, well, and it's not a novel idea, by the way, because I believe we do this sometimes in cancer intervention. So based on who you are, based on symptom presentation, experience, whatever, these inputs, what dosage of treatment might be most appropriate for you.
Yep.
And the way that you do this is you have a big data set to which you can compare the individual to. And essentially the data set will tell you, oh, for the folks like that, like Jimmy and Nick, their odds of success follow this regimen. And how do you build that? Because we were getting so nerdy today. We were like doing, you know, regressions by hand.
Yeah.
And what we're learning, which we're not experts, but from the most basic kind of models, supervised machine learning models, which is our understanding is one of the most basic AIs you can create, is that's the first step you have to do and feed it that information and start to create your manual weights.
Yep. Train it.
Am I right?
That's right. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
And the clinical utility of that could be interesting, but we don't even know. We're trying to figure out if is this a hosted thing? Is this going to be here?
Yeah.
Where are we going to get this model? Because I don't know how to write that model.
I don't know how to write the model.
But we think, you know, like it seems people say that word a lot on TikTok. You know, there seems to be these models somewhere. I don't know where these models are. Yeah.
I mean, who knows?
But it's interesting. Yeah, the application of AI. I think Christina Hartunian, who's here, was asking us about AI and like phone cameras and what was it, Gemini? Is that what you were saying in terms of that funny one that I'm not going to mention? It was Google's solution that you were showing me.
Oh, yeah. To depression?
Yeah. But how people are, I mean, everybody seems to be on this road. How else do you see us being able to use it? I mean,
I kind of want to start there. And I think for me, I have to have like a direction.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm thinking about something that's brand new to my brain,
Yeah.
I want to be able to say like, how can we use it? And I think this is the perfect opportunity for us to use it with the data that we already have. After that, I have no idea.
But isn't
The
it kind
sky's
of
the limit.
annoying to hear like the clickbait, like integrate AI in
Yeah.
everything or
Yeah.
you'll be behind? I'm just kind of like, what's the example, you know? So
Yeah, no idea. But I think it's coming.
I do
mean,
too.
it's going to
I
take
do
over.
too.
I mean, just like
and also people's understanding of what AI actually is
Sure.
or are needs to be kind of, you know,
Yeah.
I could see us
Identified.
using it in some like financial forecasting or kind of the identification of certain payers' performance versus others. But we already kind of do a decent
Kinda
job
already
of
do that,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's, that's what's going to be. We'll have to check in again on that to
Yeah,
see if something like that
definitely.
actually is able to happen.
yeah.
You know,
Yep.
what do you think is the strength of Cumberland Heights,
Strength of Cumberland Heights.
given your unique perspective?
Oh, my cell phone keeps ringing. Oh my God.
Like an icy ringtone.
That's from 24. You ever watch 24, the series?
We some of us have.
That's CTU's phone number. That's how their phones rang. So I changed. I've, ever since I watched 24, I've downloaded it through Zedge, right? Through Zedge, and I love 24. So that's what it's from. 24, yeah. Jack Bauer. Remember that, right? Yeah. Sorry. Strength of Cumberland Heights. Got off topic there. I think, to be honest, I think that the brand recognition, and I think that the care that's given to patients over time, and having those patients then refer other people back to Cumberland Heights. I mean, I think that tells a lot about a company, whether it's a treatment facility or, a restaurant. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I think that's very key. And I think that comes from, good leadership, good counselors. I mean, I think as a whole, you have to have a cohesive group of individuals that have a common goal, common mission, to kind of keep that ship sailing.
All right, last question for the day.
Okay.
Then we can keep working on AI after this.
Sweet.
What if there is one area? Sometimes I ask folks this. What would you like to see change at Cumberland Heights if you had the power to change one thing?
How would it change? That's a good question. That's a hard question.
He can't think of anything. That's why it's hard. Not because there's so many.
No, I mean, no. I can't
just
think of
kidding.
anything. You're
I'm
right.
kidding.
That's what
I'm
I'm saying. I
kidding.
can't think of anything from a change perspective. I mean, yeah, I really can't think of anything, Nick. I really can't.
Better food. We have great food. Shout out to
We have
Ryan.
great food.
Today
No, it is
the
great.
kale salad today. I'm not, and I don't like kale. Did you have it,
No, I didn't have it.
bro? You missed out.
Well, I'm gonna say.
Did
this.
anybody else have it?
Hopefully, this won't be on the. We'll cut this out of the podcast. But see, I've been here so long with Jim Threadgill. I'm a Threadgill kitchen. I mean, talk about phenomenal.
But the kitchen also changed because everybody here doesn't even know, like pre-COVID,
Pre-COVID.
the dining hall situation here was a total
Oh, yeah.
different beast.
Oh, yeah.
Like 50 staff probably
Yeah.
would be eating inside and outside. Like
yeah,
it was just like a madhouse.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
you really had to get to lunch. Like we still do get there like 11:30, right? But I mean, you had to get there, or else you're going to be in a line that's reaching outside. It was like that.
And
Yeah.
and just COVID kind of changed things, and now there's
It hasn't even gotten back to it. I mean, even
the
though we
basement
can,
dwellers. We stick together. But like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it hasn't gotten back necessarily to that as of
No,
yet. Yeah.
no, it has not.
Yeah.
It's a big difference, huge difference.
Yeah. Well, let me say this. I think that if I want Cumberland Heights to continue to be strategic and not reactive. Because you've done such a good job of that.
Yeah, so I wasn't trying to say anything like
I get it.
negative about it. I mean, but you're 100% right. I mean, I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think that even though we've gone through some things and
Yeah.
we've been reactive, I think sometimes we kind of still slide back into that place of complacency when it comes to things, and then next time something happens, then you're reactive again. You know, so I agree with you for bringing that up. I just didn't want to say it.
It's hard to be it is hard, and we talk about this a lot, like how we work together
Yeah,
and all the different requests and projects that different teams might have.
Yeah.
It's so hard to defend against everyone's time to stay focused on whatever the big three might be for that week.
yeah, yeah,
You know, because there could be, you know, that Jay could need, you know, Robin, you know, there's a fire over here, you know,
Yeah.
figuratively speaking, like, and you got to tackle that. It takes so much, what am I trying to say? Like mental focus,
yeah. Energy.
on kind of saying no to things that are lower priority.
True.
You know,
True.
and not forgetting about them.
Not forgetting about them. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
sometimes it's easy to come to work here and, you know, we all show up and we're here, and then it's the business of the day and there are people stopping by and then it's
Yeah.
3 o'clock and
Exactly.
you're like, well,
Exactly.
we got to start wrapping things up. You
Yeah,
know, in a
and I
couple
think
hours.
that is very difficult. I know for me, you know, I think I was on a call today with the team. I was saying, well, hopefully I can get back to this. It's been like 2 weeks since I was supposed to be working on this project, but you know, like you said, as days kind of come and go, things pop up. You know, needs need to be met. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thanks for being here, man.
Well, thanks for
doing
the
this.
invite.
Was it what? Okay, so was it as?
No, it wasn't bad at all. I mean, it was actually. I'm just an anxious person when it comes to like.
Well, there's
having
lights in
having
here,
lights on
you know,
me,
and there's
you know, I don't.
3 red dots.
Yeah,
and-
I'm not accustomed to that. I kind of like.
Yeah.
I like to fly under the radar.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, we'll have you on again. Maybe I'll even
Okay.
invite Frazier. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because
yeah.
he probably feels a certain way about not being
Yeah,
on
bring
yet.
Frazier.
You know.
Yeah.
So for those listening today, thanks for listening. Please give us a like below, give us a follow. We really appreciate y'all. We'll see you again for next episode. Thanks, and thank you to our executive producers, Ryan
Yes, thank
Smith
you.
and Christina Hartunian,
Appreciate it.
and Starla Brown for being here in the shop today. Thank you guys. See you next time.
Thank you.